He covered her in roses. But every petal had thorns. They said love was supposed to feel gentle, like the first brush of spring air, or the warmth of a hand that steadies yours in a storm. That was how she had once imagined it, how she had once dreamed it would be. But when he loved her, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like the slow tightening of vines around her body, the prick of thorns breaking skin, the strange perfume of roses filling every breath until it drowned her. He had charmed her at first. His voice was low and soft, his hands steady, his smile the kind that burned through a crowded room and fastened itself only to her, or her. The first time he brought her roses, she had laughed because there were too many. Armfuls upon armfuls, their stems dripping with dew, their petals the deepest red she had ever seen. He laid them across her table, her bed, her floor, until her home was filled with them, and she stood laughing in the middle, breathless, her skirts brushing petals like waves on an endless sea. But when she reached to take one bloom into her hand, her fingers came away bleeding. The thorns had not been clipped. He saw the streak of red, and instead of apologizing, he kissed it. His lips closed around her wound, and when he drew back, there was a trace of her blood on his mouth. "Every rose has its price," he whispered, and she felt the words like a spell. At first she excused it. Love was meant to sting, wasn't it? To demand sacrifice, to test endurance. That was what she told herself when the scratches deepened into gashes, when her arms bore faint scars in the shape of thorns. He would laugh and cover her with more roses, pressing them into her hands, her lap, her hair, until she was buried beneath them. When she tried to push them away, his voice wrapped around her like another vine. "You are lovelier when you bleed," he told her once, pressing a rose against her chest until she winced. It did, but not enough to leave, because when he looked at her, his eyes burned with something that felt too much like worship, too much like the thing she had always longed for, to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved completely. She convinced herself that the pain was proof of that love. After all, he was always there, always watching, always bringing more roses. But the roses began to change. They no longer smelled sweet. Their perfume grew thick, metallic, like iron warming under the sun. The petals grew darker, almost black at the edges, curling as though scorched by some unseen fire. And when she tried to throw them out, she found them waiting for her again, inside her closet, beneath her sheets, floating in her bath, like drops of congealed blood. One night she woke choking, her mouth filled with petals. She clawed at her throat, coughing them up, each one streaked with red where it had scraped against the inside of her mouth. He held her as she convulsed, but when she gasped out, "Help me," he only pressed his lips against her ear and whispered, "They're just trying to grow inside you. Don't fight them. Roses only want to..." She wept then, begging him to stop. But he only smiled and brushed her tears away with a hand that smelled of crushed stems and soil. His touch left faint scratches, as though thorns grew even from his skin. Her home became a cage of vines and blossoms, their stems thickening, curling, creaking as though alive. She could not see her own walls anymore, only roses climbing higher and higher, sealing her in. And when she turned to him, asking how they had taken root so fast, his answer was simple, almost serene. "I planted them," he said, "every night while you slept." He said, "Every night while you slept, in the floors, in you." Her scream echoed through the rose-choked halls, muffled by the petals that swallowed sound as easily as they swallowed light. Her scream hung in the air only for a moment before it was devoured by the silence of roses. The petals absorbed it, softening it until it sounded no louder than a sigh. She covered her mouth, trembling, but he only tilted his head and watched her with the faintest smile, as though he had been waiting for this. He stepped closer, his shoes crunching on petals that had turned brittle beneath his feet. When he reached her, he brushed the hair from her face with slow tenderness, a gesture that once would have soothed her. But now it felt like a trap, the gentle caress before the needle pricks the skin. "You don't understand," he murmured, almost sorrowful. "You're the soil. You're what they needed all along." She stumbled back, shaking her head. No. He pressed a finger to her lips, silencing her, and in his other hand a rose bloomed as though it had been waiting. Its stem pushed out from his palm, thorns tearing his flesh open, but he did not wince. He held it out to her, blood dripping from his hand. "Take it," he whispered. She refused, clutching her arms around herself. But the stem twitched, the petals turned toward her, and the rose seemed to lean forward of its own accord, hungry. She ran through the halls, through the curtains of roses, tearing her skin on the walls of thorns, leaving streaks of blood behind her. She reached the door, but it was gone, buried beneath vines so thick they pulsed like veins. She clawed at them, screaming, but her fingers tore open against the thorns, and the vines only tightened. Behind her, his footsteps came, unhurried, steady, each one crushing another layer of petals. When he reached her, he pulled her away from the door, gathering her into his arms like a bride. She thrashed, kicked, scratched at him, but he did not loosen his grip. His arms felt unyielding, as though he were more plant than man now, his veins carrying not blood but sap. He laid her on the bed, now a nest of roses, every stem coiled and waiting. The moment her body touched the petals, the thorns sank in, piercing her through her clothes, drawing thin streams of blood that soaked into the blossoms. She screamed, but the roses drank eagerly, their petals deepening in color, their scent thickening in the air. He leaned over her, his breath warm on her cheek. "Do you see now? They only bloom for you. They've been starving, and you—" He pressed a kiss to her bleeding hand. "You are the feast they've longed for." She sobbed, gasping. "You're killing me." "No," he murmured, his voice heavy with devotion. "I'm making you eternal." The roses coiled tighter around her, their stems sliding beneath her skin, rooting themselves inside her flesh. She felt them moving in her veins, curling through her chest, pressing against her heart. Her vision blurred, and when she tried to scream again, petals rose in her throat, silencing her. Ugh. She coughed, choked, and spat out roses that bloomed red with her blood. Above her, he smiled, eyes bright with madness, and whispered, "And more beautiful than ever." And she realized then this was not love. It had never been love, it was hunger. It was the roses, using him, using her, feeding on their devotion until neither of them was human anymore. The last thing she saw before the petals covered her eyes was his face, pressed close to hers, lips whispering against her skin. "You will never wither, not while I love you." And then there was only the rustle of roses, the sound of vines creeping, the silence of a house that no longer held walls, only a garden that breathed, bled, and dreamed of her. The petals pressed against her eyes until the world went black, but she was not gone. She could still feel. Every thorn was a needle sewing her body into the bed of roses, stitching her to the vines that writhed beneath her skin. She tried to move, but her limbs no longer obeyed her. They belonged to the roses. She felt them creeping inside her chest, curling around her ribs, sliding between her bones like roots digging through soil. She gasped for air, but every breath filled her lungs with the thick perfume of roses, sweet at first, then cloying, then suffocating, until she felt as though she were drowning in nectar and blood. Her heart beat faster, desperate, and the roses pulsed in rhythm, as though they were drinking each throb, savoring it. And through it all, he held her hand. His thumb stroked her knuckles, smearing her blood across her skin. His voice was low, tender, almost like a lullaby. "You don't have to fight anymore. Just let them grow. Let them take you." Her lips moved, trembling, but no words came out. Only petals, soft red petals spilling from her mouth, fluttering onto her chest, sticking wet against her skin. She wanted to scream, to curse him, to beg for release, but all she could give him were roses. He gathered them carefully, almost reverently, catching each one in his hands. When her body convulsed and another mouthful spilled out, he pressed them to his face and inhaled. His eyes fluttered closed and he whispered, "They're perfect. You're perfect." Hours passed, or maybe days. Time no longer seemed real. The roses grew thicker around her, weaving her. She drifted in and out of darkness, her body half asleep, half awake, trapped in a dream where she was both woman and soil, lover and sacrifice. Sometimes she thought she could hear voices inside the vines, faint whispers, too many to count, murmuring beneath the rustle of leaves. They sounded like women, like hundreds of women. She realized then she was not the first. The roses had fed before. They had taken others. Their voices lingered, trapped in the vines, calling out warnings she could no longer understand. When she stirred again, she felt his lips on her forehead. His voice was gentle. "They've accepted you. Do you feel it? You're part of them now. You'll never fade." But she did feel it. Every thorn in her veins, every petal brushing against her organs, every root digging deeper into her marrow. The roses were inside her, not just wrapping her body but becoming it. She tried to cry, but her tears turned into drops of crimson that seeped into the pillow, blooming into tiny roses as soon as they touched fabric. The bed shook faintly beneath her. The vines writhed like serpents, slithering under the sheets, over the floor, into the walls. The entire house groaned with their weight, creaking as though the wood itself were splitting apart. She realized the roses were not confined to her. They were spreading outward faster now, fed by her blood. Through the haze, she thought, "If I die, they'll stop. If I can die, they won't spread any further." But when she tried to will herself into stillness, to stop breathing, she couldn't. The vines pulsed inside her like a second heart, forcing her lungs to rise and fall, forcing her body to live. The roses would not let her die. And he knew it. He bent close, pressing his mouth to her ear. His whisper was hoarse, trembling with ecstasy. "You see, love can't die. Not when it's rooted this deep." She tried to turn her head away, but the vines held her fast. All she could do was lie there as he kissed her lips, now stained red with blood and petals, his tongue tasting the roses that spilled from her mouth. When he drew back, his eyes were bright, fevered. Soon you'll bloom completely, and then you'll never leave me. Not ever." The house shuddered again. She heard glass breaking, wood splintering. The roses were pushing outward, cracking the windows, prying apart the floorboard. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the vines stretching through the foundation, down into the earth, searching for more. They were hungry. They would never be satisfied with just her. She tried again to scream, to warn the world outside, but her voice was gone. All that came out was the rustle of petals, and he only laughed softly, holding her closer as the roses claimed the house. The night dragged on, though she could not tell if it was truly night anymore. The windows had been smothered in roses until no light could pass through. The air was thick and wet, like a greenhouse sealed shut, the weight of perfume clinging to her lungs with every breath. Somewhere above her, in the ceiling, she heard the creak of vines splitting through beams, the snap of wood giving way. The house was no longer a house. It was becoming a hive. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her mind slipping like a moth trapped in sap. And sometimes gently combing through her hair, sometimes kneeling on the floor, whispering prayers to the roses as though they were gods. Other times she woke to find him asleep beside her, curled in the bed of thorns, his cheek pressed against the petals that drained her. He slept peacefully, never wincing when the thorns pierced his skin, as if he no longer felt their pain at all. When she managed to speak, her voice ragged, broken, she begged him, Please stop this. You love me. If you love me, if we go." His eyes opened slowly, and he looked at her with a tenderness that made her stomach turn. He brushed his thumb across her lips, collecting the smear of blood there, and kissed it. "I let you go?" "We whispered. Do you still not understand? I never held you. It's the roses. They wanted you long before I did, and now they'll never let you go." Her tears fell hot and fast, soaking into the roses beneath her. The petals stirred at the touch, curling around each droplet until tiny new buds opened, drinking her sorrow. She felt the pull of them deep in her veins, as though every tear she shed fed another bloom. She tried to turn her head to look away from him, but her body obeyed less and less. The roses inside her held her still, a puppet strung up by roots. He leaned close, his breath against her ear. "Do you want to know the truth?" His voice shook with reverence, with madness. "You're not the first. The roses told me about the others. Every woman they ever touched, every body they ever claimed, they remembered them. Their voices live in the vines. Listen. And she did. And she did. She forced herself to be still, to shut out the sound of his breathing, the pounding of her own heart. In the silence, beneath the rustle of petals, she heard it. Whispers, dozens of them. They murmured in a language she couldn't fully grasp, their words tangled in sorrow and pain, calling out to her, warning her, her breath caught in her throat. No. Yes, he said, smiling softly. You've joined something eternal. Do you see how lucky you are? They'll never let you die. You'll never be forgotten. Every drop of blood, every sigh, every petal, they'll carry you forever. She stared at him, horror flooding her veins. You call this love? He tilted his head, studying her. What else could it be? You'll live forever in roses. You'll outlast the world itself. But she didn't want eternity. She wanted breath. She wanted freedom. She wanted her own voice again instead of the endless choking petals. The roses tightened around her body as though they could hear her thoughts, their thorns pressing deeper into her flesh. She gasped, writhing, and he held her still, murmuring comfort. Shh. Don't fight them. Fighting only makes them cling harder. Surrender. That's all you have to do. Surrender, and you'll be beautiful. Her visions... She thought of the door buried under vines, the window smothered, the floor split by roots. She thought of the whispers in the walls, other women trapped, remembered, never freed. Her heart raced, but the roses raced with it, feeding on every beat. She realized then, she could not stop them. She could not kill them, but maybe she could take him with her. She forced her lips to move, petals sticking to her tongue, her words raw and broken. She whispered. His eyes widened, and for a moment he looked like a boy again. Longing, desperate, believing, he leaned down eagerly, his lips pressing against hers. Not on him, but on the petals that surged up her throat in that instant, tearing them apart, letting the thorns slice her mouth open. Blood poured, hot and fast. And the roses felt it. They surged from her throat into his mouth, pouring down his lungs, writhing inside him. He convulsed, clutching at his chest, but he didn't let go of her. Even as the thorns tore through him, even as his veins filled with vines, he clung tighter, moaning her name through the flood of petals. She felt it happening, felt the roses splitting from her body into his, dividing, devouring. For the first time in weeks, she could move her fingers, twitch her arm, shake her head. The roses had found new soil. He collapsed beside her, choking, blood running from his nose, his eyes, his mouth. Roses burst from his throat, blooming violently, their petals slick and trembling. His body arched, twisted, then stilled, and the house grew quiet. The vines loosened around her wrists, her chest, her throat. She gasped, sucking in air that tasted of copper and decay, but not roses. Not yet. She forced herself to sit up, weak and trembling, tearing thorns from her skin. Blood streamed down her arms, her legs, but she could move again. She looked at him. He lay motionless, roses blooming from his chest where his heart should be, his face pale beneath the blossoms. And yet, his lips still curved faintly, as though in death he believed he had won. The whispers in the walls grew louder, dozens of voices rising in unison. She thought she heard laughter, soft, broken laughter, not her own. The roses were not dead. They had simply shifted. Her body trembled as she rose from the bed of thorn. Every step felt like walking on broken glass. Her skin raw and dripping, but she moved. For the first time since the roses had claimed her, she moved. The house groaned around her, vines curling along the walls, twitching as though aware of her defiance. She staggered toward the door, pulling herself free of the tendrils that still reached for her ankles, her arms, her hair. Each vine she tore away screamed in her ears, voices of women trapped inside, shrieking as though she were killing them all over again. She didn't. The door loomed ahead, once buried beneath vines, now weakened by the rose's violent shift into him. She clawed at it with bleeding fingers, ripping stems, ignoring the thorns that pierced deeper into her palms. At last the wood gave way, Cold air hit her face. For a moment she froze. She had forgotten what air felt like, clean and sharp, free of the suffocating perfume. She stumbled outside, collapsing into the dirt, coughing up the last of the petals that had clung to her throat. Behind her, the house pulsed. The windows glowed faintly red as though every bloom inside had taken fire. But no flame consumed them. She turned her head just enough to see his silhouette in the broken doorway, his body slumped, his chest blooming with roses that writhed like serpents, stretching outward to replace him. The house was not dead. It would never die. She forced herself to her feet, every muscle screaming, and ran into the night. Her blood left a trail behind her, but she didn't care. The air grew cleaner with every step, the whispers fainter. She ran until her lungs burned, until her body threatened to give way, until the roses were only a memory scratching at her skin. When she finally collapsed in the field beyond the woods, dawn was breaking. Pale light washed over her torn body, her bloodied hands, her face streaked with tears. For the first time she saw no petals in her breath, no vines curling beneath her skin. But still, she did not smile, because as the sun rose, a single drop of blood trickled from her mouth and fell into the grass. And when it touched the soil, a rosebud opened.